Hello there again, everybody. Jeremy Miller back with another episode of the Hire and Fire podcast. We have myself and Chad Sandy today for episode number 9, talking about knowing your limits. It's basically a work-life balance discussion. Very subjective, of course, so everybody has their own experience, but it's nice to hear other people's opinions, and we tackle it in detail today, so enjoy the show. Welcome back, everybody. Episode number 9 of the Hire and Fire podcast, brought to you by Pirate Consulting. I am your host, Jeremy Miller, and this week, yet again, we can't shake him, even when we try. We have Chad Sandy with us. Say hello.
Howdy.
Chad.
Shucking and jiving.
Yeah, you're here. We have a reprieve of guests this week. We got a few more coming in. It was really fun having Ahmad in here last week. We got some other people in the industry. We got consultants. We got some recruiters that are no longer in the business going to come in and swap some stories. It'll be fun over the next few weeks. But today's topic is Know Your Limits, Idiot. And the basic discussion around this is anything having to do with what we've experienced and or how do you know without the experience when you've gone too far. Whether, anything from working too much, your hobbies are out of control, you've took on too much at work-life balance type discussion. That's kind of where we're going today. So here we are.
Here we are.
So my know the limits, the easy one that pops into my mind is for 10 or 11 years consistently in a row, I got myself into the office at 6:15 in the morning. And this is coming from a individual who hates alarms, snoozes 8-9 times, definitely not a morning person, but somehow, some way I pulled it off 5 days a week for 10 straight years.
How did you do that?
Well, it was driving my now ex-wife insane with alarms that started at literally 4:40 in the morning, and I'd get out of bed at around 5:30. My logic was I could skip traffic. I could get in early and get started before some of the bullshit meetings kicked in. And then having kids, I could leave at 5 and go do what I got to do, whether it was for me or it was a flippin' sporting event or whatever. But that was taxing. I can't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. And my old colleague and I used to joke all the time because there was only 2 of us that pulled this off. And every once in a while, people would kind of try and join us and make it like a month at the most. Because that's a taxing thing to do to yourself.
Do you recognize a point? I just jotted down a note, law of diminishing returns.
Ooh.
So when you were doing that, how long? 11 years?
11 years, 10, 11 years.
Did you hit a point where you think you became less productive as a result of that, or not really?
No, I don't. I didn't become less productive. I was more productive. But I think that the idea of knowing the limits, and if I had shoulda, coulda, wouldas around that, it was just part of my justification of being a little bit of a workaholic. And not understanding the impact that has on me. So if I want to go have a few drinks, now I'm going to be utterly exhausted and maybe hungover because I still have to get up early.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm really, really tired and every single day I'm running out of energy at night and I'm not as available for the fam as I could have been because I was just overemphasizing my job. But it friggin' worked. That was the problem. It worked. And I produced at work. So it was reinforcing that habit, which was good, but the limit was that I don't think I ever really understood how that negatively impacted my family.
Because I think when I hear know your limits, what I think is knowing your limit is recognizing when you hit that point of law of diminishing returns, where, obviously in work, it didn't happen for you, what you just said. But I think for most people, had you stayed at that previous job long enough, eventually you would have hit that point where, okay, this is kind of the cap.
Yeah.
If I, and I don't know how it could have been, you were already working so many hours, but in general, I think the ability to recognize when you kind of hit that point where if I do more or longer hours or take on any more responsibilities, the results will start to go the other direction. Thoughts?
No, I totally agree. What I was thinking right away when you were talking was one of my old buddies always joked that he didn't have many friends because he just didn't have the bandwidth. And there was only 24 hours in a day, and he knew that he just couldn't take on any more.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm really. I know I'm not good at figuring that out.
Yeah.
Like you joked about all the freaking volunteering and stuff that you've done. At one point, you had to have woken up and said, I got the cart before the horse. I got my priorities out of whack, or what? Like, I'm stressed out like crazy, but I volunteered for this. Like, this is something I'm doing.
Yeah, something's got to give.
Right.
That did happen, and of course, then because what started to happen was some things went backwards. Whether it was the personal life or the work life, and I had to cut back. But I had went over the limit before I realized. So I think the trick might be to recognize when you're at the line. I went over it.
So what happened? What was the fallout in that circumstance? Was it stress? Was it anger? Was it arguing with the wife? Was it guilt?
I think it was a combination of stress and anger. So the stress started to affect my work, and then I became a little bitter, which affected my work. And I think it was just a matter of I had exceeded the limit of what I was capable of doing in a given day or week or month. And then it got to a point where every single thing was an issue or a problem or stressful, because my brain was already so full.
Yes, that was mine. I would come home and I would need to find a way to unplug from the fucking insanity that was traffic, 11, 12 hours in a high pressure sales environment, traffic on the way home. But now when I walk into the home with wife and kids, it was just as chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
And what took me a long time to figure out was we would start to escape it. So I was trying to get in the home to get the hell away from the bullshit out there that I have to deal with all day, while my wife was at home with the kids and she was craving a way to get the hell out of the house because that's her grind.
Yep.
And we were trying to balance that. So I'd want to come home, unplug my brain somehow, and I never really found a good way to do that, because I'm either immediately jumping into a sporting event or some argument or issue or whatever. And then even if we went out, we were both leaving the home in order to go do that.
Yep.
So we were trading a better thing for a substitute just to numb the shenanigans.
Yeah.
And I think knowing your limits is, in my opinion, based on my experience, the telltale sign of you reaching your max is when you start to use coping mechanisms to get you through all that shit. Whether it's anger, you seclude yourself, you go really quiet, booze, drugs, whatever it might be. That is the telltale, like, I'm at my wit's fucking end.
Yeah. And I know
a desperate fool at the end of his pitiful rope.
I know at work where it started to rear its ugly head for me is I'm generally kind of a happy-go-lucky, participate in razzing people and getting razz and practical jokes and all that. And I remember, and this is probably a result, I didn't recognize it initially, but obviously this was at a point where I had crossed that line where I said where just my brain was too full. I was too stressed out. I had taken on too much in all aspects of my life. And at work, what started to happen was those practical jokes and those razzing, back and forth, my razzing turned into, had a little bit too much of a bitter, a little
sharp there.
A little too real. And people in the office started calling me Salty Sandy
Oh!
as a result.
Which, from my perspective, doesn't match.
Mm-hmm.
So, to your point, that was kind of a rough patch for you.
Right,
Yeah.
and I didn't even recognize it. Now, there are some things right around that same time where the line gets drawn for you. So I was still, in addition to all the volunteering and working long hours and trying to be everything at work and going to all the happy hours and doing everything, I was still playing old man hockey. I was a goalie. I was still playing old man baseball on 35 and over amateur baseball. And in the course of about 2 months, I tweaked my groin playing goalie. I was 40. And I blew out my knee throwing a pitch in a baseball game in September, like 2 months later.
So your body's trying to tell you enough?
So the line got drawn for me.
Right.
And then it was like, okay,
Right.
baseball's done. Hockey's done.
Yeah, I had a similar one with sports. I mean, I played beer league softball. I was pretty good with the glove and kind of shitty with the bat. And I would play double headers. I enjoyed those, but my freaking shoulder was screaming at me every single time, so I just quote unquote retired.
Yeah.
But that balancing of life's activities, like for example, don't we all kind of view work as an isolated component of our lives?
Right.
And you have work relationships and a certain pride at work and a certain income level at work, and you kind of have this persona, right? And then you kind of have the same thing at home with your family, and then you have different personas when you're out in the public square, right? Your kids' sporting events or whatever, church. But they're all interconnected, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think we kind of we're almost trying to fool ourselves if we try and think that they're separate and not interconnected.
Right.
Because if you're having a shitty time at work, your boss is riding you, there's a project timeline, your sales numbers are down, who cares what the story is? It's just a rough patch at work. That shit's coming home with you, period.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be a little bit shorter or a little bit less available. I just don't think I was really cognizant of that. I don't even know what age I kind of started realizing it, but I don't think it was before I was 30. Do you remember, is it just because when you're in your 20s you can frickin' get bombed with your buddies and show up and the next day and you have 9 lives, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a component to it, that when you're younger, you don't recognize that you have exceeded those limits or you're getting close to the line, because I think physically you can just kind of handle it. But again, I say it's getting to that point where you recognize when you're approaching that line, that limit. And for me, I think the physical probably did play into that, is all those things we're just talking about, had those happened when I was 30 instead of 40, I maybe could have handled it better, because the physical piece I could have absorbed more of the physical piece, right? Which then would have led to the emotional piece, and I wouldn't have been as tired.
Yeah.
Which then would have led to not being as salty at work or whatever. What do you think happens to? Why do you think people in a work environment get to a point where they don't know their limits or realize they've maybe bit off more than they can chew? Why do you think that happens?
I don't know, for the average person, obviously we can only speak on our own experience, but for me, I think it's pride. You have a certain mentality and image and reputation that you want to uphold. And when other things are affecting you, it manifests itself in different ways. Either, like a lot of people are prone to be more quiet, and then obviously there are people that are prone to be a little bit more vocal whenever they're stressed out. When I had my Salty Sandy days, I never got a nickname, I'm surprised. I knew it. I could feel it. Mm-hmm. Right? So I'm so stressed out in general that I'm trying to get everything done. And anything I perceived as a distraction to that was considered an annoyance.
Sure.
Even people trying to have fun sometimes was annoying as shit.
Yeah.
Or people asking me random questions. Like I was at my boiling point and I didn't know how to process it. But we're stuck, right? Like we have bills. Like you can't just stop going to work. Like if you have shit going on in your personal life, you have to keep showing up. So you're kind of fighting through it. You know what I mean? Or if you're struggling with your job and you're really unhappy right now, you still have to go home and you still have to be whatever it is they need you to be or whatever you want to be. And it's really, really tough to be able to balance the two of those. And I think everybody wants to keep the facade going.
Yeah.
You know, like you want people to think that you have your shit together. So when you don't have your shit together, you have to work even harder just to keep the image up because you know deep down that you don't. And that's where the outside signs could be your best pointer. When you have people coming up to you at the office and asking you if you're okay or giving you a fucking nickname.
Yeah.
Right?
Which I did not recognize as a negative at first, by the way. I thought, oh, how cute. It rhymes.
It does rhyme.
Or whatever.
That's true.
I think a lot of times, I just wrote down, I think people, in their effort to climb the ladder, whatever that means at your company that you're working at, in an effort to climb the ladder without a definitive plan, is what causes people to not know their limits and then keep biting off more than they can chew because they think that's what management or ownership wants to see. And I can only think of, I was just thinking here, one example in my whole career where I met a guy that seemed perfectly content where he was at. Like he just had this happiness about him. And it was years ago, my uncle headed up, many radio stations in town here. And so we were at his office. We had gone to breakfast. I went to his office. We were walking through the pit. And he was introducing me to different people. And almost all of them seemed like you would think, right? I'm just some schmuck that my uncle was introducing them to. And so, you got the hi, how do you do? But they were busy, real busy, right? They didn't have time to, hi, nice to meet you. And there was this one guy, gray-haired guy, that seemed so old at the time, and I'm guessing he was probably 50, maybe. And he seemed so happy and content. And we get into my uncle's office, and I say, hey, what's up with that dude? He's just a sales guy. But he's, old. He's old. And Mick says, yeah, well, that old sales guy makes $300,000 a year and goes home at 4:30 to his family every day. He's got zero stress. Like, that's a guy that seemed like he knew his limits.
Yeah.
And he probably recognized at some point, I am really good at what I do. And I don't need to be the sales manager, and I don't need to be the general sales manager, and I don't need to be the general manager, and I don't need to be the vice president. I can be the best sales guy here, and that's what he was. And there was just a happiness about him. And that's the only person I can say I've ever
In your 51 years, that one guy. Well, okay, so I had a flip side experience recently where I'm at a bar, I'm meeting somebody, but I'm there early, which doesn't happen very often. And the two guys next to me are really emotionally gabbing it up. Like leaning forward, and it was obvious immediately that they were coworkers. And it was just a massive bitch session about what's going on. Yep. And it made me laugh because I've been involved in those conversations 8 million times. And when you're in the middle of it, and you know all the key players and all the dynamics and all the bullshit and fucking Susie in accounting who doesn't do shit but everybody thinks she's amazing, or this stupid process that was rolled out and I can't believe John over in IT right?
Yeah.
And when you're in the middle of it, it's very emotionally charging and it's frustrating and you're venting. But I'm the guy outside of it. I'm just sitting there listening. And it made me laugh because it's just bullshit.
Yeah.
Like It's nobody else really cares corporate nonsense. And it got me thinking about, like, so at what point is that guy's fight futile? Like, has he reached the point in his job, in his organization, in his career where he should move on? Like, maybe he's at that point. Like, he's pissed for good reason and he needs to take his services elsewhere. Or is he doing the exact right thing and fighting the good fight and trying to get other opinions and seeing if he can drive change? Like, how do you know what that is?
Right.
Because a lot of people leave a job before they've accomplished what they're capable of doing there. They prematurely bounced. And you said it earlier. You don't even have one of those recently. So you can look back on your jobs that you've left and say, good, I should have left. But there are people that left too damn early.
Right.
But then there are people like me who hung on too damn long.
Yeah. Well, I actually think in our industry, in IT staffing, I think what's more common than the other is for people to leave too early before they've received the fruits of their labor.
Yeah.
And so I think they've erroneously identified their limit and then bolted, and they never knew that line was actually further down. And maybe had they made some other tweaks and changes in their life, whether it's at work, work ethic, work role, work hours, or something outside of work, I think they mistakenly thought they were at the limit and made a move, and we'll never know what they could have accomplished had they stuck it out a little bit.
Well, and the regret either direction, because if you're leaving a job or have left a job recently and it's kind of it's in your brain in the recent past, normally it's very polarizing. You're either happy that you're gone or you miss it.
Right.
And you won't know that until you're gone. So you have to be able to figure out a way to process that. So if I was to devise a strategy as to how to do that, I guess I would probably sit down and start to have vulnerable discussions with my boss, even if I'm putting myself in a negative position. Because if you're struggling with anything, your pay, the hours, your happiness, a certain coworker who cares, if you don't try and fix that with the people that actually have the power to do so, then you're kind of stuck in bitch mode. The only thing you can do is whine and complain to other people around you. Yeah. If you go to the boss, you have a shot, but you have an equal shot of screwing yourself over and ruining your reputation, and maybe that's just the way to do it.
Yeah.
So that you can kind of figure out whether or not management is going to respond well to what you need or want.
Yeah.
Then you can make your move because it's made itself clear.
Yeah. And even prior to that, if we're going to put this under the umbrella of strategy, and this may be one thing I did right back then when I said I was volunteering for this and still doing that and playing this and working long hours, is one thing I did do, not on purpose, but looking back, it was probably a good strategic move, is I hit the pause button and assessed my situation, just assessed things. So before making any rash decisions like screw the hockey board or I'm quitting that job or whatever, I recognized that I got to unload some things here. I can't take this anymore. I'm going to have a nervous breakdown, for Christ's sake. So I just kind of hit the pause button and assessed work. Do I really want to, and then fill in the blank with all the things I was doing at work. Besides being a recruiter and having some management responsibilities, mentorship responsibilities, and then the home life stuff, I started to assess, do I really want to do that? Yes or no, and why? Why do I even want to? And after hitting the pause button, then it became the path became a little more clear. In my case, it was giving up some of this other stuff that was giving me no fulfillment anymore at all, the outside of work things. And on the work side, for me, I stopped going to every single
Happy hour?
Everyone, right? Because, this is, wouldn't you say this is the happy hour culture is pretty common.
It's a sales thing, man. Yeah. Our industry is no different.
And so what would happen where I was at is you have your official happy hours where it's a office thing.
Sponsored or what have you.
And then it might be, Joe, the sales guy, is having a happy hour for a couple of his clients. Hey, do any of you want to go? I need, 2 or 3 or 4 of you.
Sure.
And I was always one of them saying, yep, I'll go. Yep, I'll go. Well, eventually I kind of cut down on that or cut it out. And so I would still do the company sponsored things. And so by removing some things on my plate at work and removing some things on my plate at home, my production at work as a recruiter, my weekly spread or margin, how I get paid, my commissions, that went up. So I recognize my limit.
Yeah, which is impressive because I don't think most people do. And I'm a limit pushing type person. So I'm trying to break through barriers and accomplish things that a lot of people would say are either impossible or not probable. And frankly, the more you tell me that it's impossible, the more you're going to pump me up.
Yeah.
For people like me on that end of the spectrum, we're just prone to take on too much, or it's self-inflicted stress. And that's tough to be able to know how to balance, especially if you don't have anybody in your life that is cognizant of the change and trying to sit you down and say, if you can't see it, I can. You've become a different person. You went from happy-go-lucky Chad to salty Sandy. I remember there was a guy that I used to work with that I was smiley guy at the office. And he would always say, like, hey, if we can stick with it, eventually we'll be like Miller, who's making a bunch of money and smiling all the time.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that, and I'm like, that's weird. That's not even how I see myself.
Right.
So he saw me happier than I thought I was. But towards the end of my career, when the bitterness officially took over, it was just the end. And I was unhappy with them, and they were unhappy with me.
Yeah.
It was the exact opposite feedback, and I was equally blind to it. You kind of know. But you convince yourself that you have your shit together, and that since you have your shit together in your own brain, other people think you do too.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, the people closest to you can see it. And maybe it's whether or not, A, you get the feedback, and B, can you actually do something with it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I also think in our industry, there's not a lot of career planning that goes on, I don't think. And so getting back to both the climbing the ladder thing and your thing about sitting down and talking to the boss and running the risk, whatever.
Yeah.
I think one thing management or ownership can do, so I'm going to kind of flip the coin a little bit, is have a better career plan, career path option or options for their staff. So things are a little more defined in the hopes that then you eliminate the people who are there, not eliminate the people, but you eliminate this idea where people are volunteering for everything. They're going to every single event because they feel like that's their only way to climb, because they don't have a plan. Whereas I think if more staffing companies had more regular touch points with their staff in terms of career paths and what is it you want to do and what do you like to do and where do you see yourself, and okay, now let's hammer out a plan for that. I think that might help as well. I do think in our biz there's a lot of that, not knowing your limits because you don't know what the limit's supposed to be to try to climb the ladder. And I think that is one of the causes for why there's so much job hopping that goes on in staffing. Would you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, interesting point, just because we're revenue generated companies. So, when there's only two different types of revenue generating people here. You're a recruiter or you're sales.
Right.
If you want to climb the ladder out of that, you're immediately having to get into some type of management.
Right.
And that's not necessarily for everybody.
Yep.
And I think there's a notion for most people that, like, if you want to get ahead, you have to continue to move up the ladder via title. But to your point, with the sales guy who was content, he knew that that was his right level. My little brother is actually impressively thinking about this right now. You know, he's a kind of like a senior manager level in Comcast. He lives in Denver, and he definitely could move into a director level role. He's got the experience. He's finalizing his education. He's got the clout. But he's asking himself, like, is this what I want for my life? Mm-hmm. Like, that's another level. And he can see it inside of his company. So if you know what the next level looks like and you don't think that is going to bring you satisfaction and happiness, then the income and pride in the title may not be worth it for you. It just might not be.
So I think about the guy at the radio station, and I think he was able to do his job and just be a good salesperson and probably not have to worry about what his management was thinking. He was probably crystal clear that he knew that his management was just fine with him just being a really, really good salesperson.
But that's the rare component of what you're talking about with supervisors, because that is the lone employee that you can leave alone.
Yeah.
You don't need to be, that person doesn't need to be asked what they want to do next, because there isn't a next.
Yeah.
I think your argument is 9 out of 10 aren't that way. They're wanting something more. And that shit changes, right? Like, think about what you wanted when you were single compared to dating, compared to being married, compared to with children.
Yeah.
Every single one of those phases changed what you want in life and probably made you desire money more than you did before.
Sure.
But then there's an equal number of people where money is not what they're looking for. And we deal with staffing. We're asking people every day what they want to do. And it's a lot. It's shorter commutes. It's more time flexibility. It's a smaller company, a bigger company. People are trying to be able to improve their situation. And maybe that is fixable inside of their current company if someone's asking, is your point. Mm-hmm. If someone's asking, what the hell do you want to do? What would make you happier? Most people think they know what that is and they'll say it. But if they're not being asked, then they don't know what to do to get there. Then you feel like it's arbitrary and you feel like you have to go to dumbass happy hours in order to please people, and you don't even know if that's what's going to get the job done.
Right.
But let's be honest, 99 out of 100 people have no frickin' desire to sit down with their boss and tell them they're unhappy. They feel like they're going to be treated differently. They feel like their job might become in jeopardy. Think about how many people we work with that have zero desire to let anybody know around them that they're looking for a new job.
Yeah.
That's what's funny about the staffing business. We're always looking for referrals, and we're asking people if they know anybody who's looking for a job.
Yeah.
How many people right now in your life do you know actively that are looking for a new job? That's not something most people scream from the rooftops.
Yeah, no. I know one, my son.
Singular.
Yeah.
And he's your child.
Yeah. So if anyone's looking for a great junior industrial engineer.
Industrial engineers, we have one.
Yeah.
But the knowing the limits, for me personally, it's just really tough to know based on my own day-to-day experience, because I do a really good job of tricking myself into thinking that I got shit covered.
Yeah.
And even if I'm making mistakes or I'm doing something too much that I know I shouldn't be, I'm going to have to learn that lesson the hard way. And man, it would be great if I could get that feedback from external sources. I probably have an ex-wife that if she was listening would be laughing at this right now.
Sure.
But I don't know. Have you had moments in your life besides Salty Sandy that people can see you're unhappy, but you can't see it even when they're telling you?
Yes, ironically, the one person is my mother, and I don't even physically see her that often. I speak with her often, and even more often, I text with her. And it is crazy, really crazy. I didn't even grow up with my mother. That she will, out of the blue, text me, "Are you okay?" or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And she'll do it at a moment where I'm not okay.
Where you're not okay.
It's crazy how, what's the word? How would she know that? She's an hour away from
right.
So she's the one person I would say, I don't know what it is. If it's the infrequency or frequency of the texting or the tone on the call or when we see each other, because I certainly don't bring home my stress to her or unload on her. But it's just...
But she has a motherly sixth sense somehow.
She really does.
Yeah.
Really does.
Yeah.
Does your mom?
No. I don't think she has. I don't think I have anybody in my life that I would say has proven to have kind of, prescient ability to be able to hit me at the right time.
Yeah. I mean, even at work, the whole salty Sandy thing.
Didn't get through.
No, I mean, even I had. I'm talking about the givers of the salty Sandy, not me receiving it. I had a lot of friends at work that you now kind of realize 5 years later were work friends.
Right.
But not even any of them ever pulled me aside and say, "Hey, dude, you all right?" At all. So even their giving me the salty Sandy was more like a joke, but serious, but evidently not
super passive aggressive.
Yeah, but not serious enough to pull me aside and say, "Hey, is everything all right?" But my mother was.
So maybe, part of the solution to this discussion, because I think as a general rule, anybody listening would agree that if you look back on your life, you have those periods of time where you were doing shit that you shouldn't have been doing. Mm-hmm. Or you were acting in a way that either didn't match your character or it didn't fit the persona that you want to give off, or all of the above. And people can see that. But you need that one person around you that is able to diagnose it and communicate it to you.
And most people are unwilling to do that. And I was just thinking as you were saying that, just today, as a matter of fact, in the office, we had a recruiter. He was heads down at his desk a little longer than normal. He wasn't taking the occasional, "Let's go play some pool" breaks. Mm-hmm. And one of the other recruiters at one point said, "Hey, everything all right?" And that's probably one of the first times I've heard that, where he was serious. He was just asking if he was okay. And he was. Everything was fine. He said, "No, I just got some stuff.
I got some shit to do.
I got to get some stuff done." But the point was, he was asking him. Mm-hmm. And maybe that could be a message for folks, is we all need to open up a little bit and be willing to ask.
Well, and I think the main crux of this goes back to something I mentioned earlier, where we all really, really have this strange need for people to think that we're doing well.
Yeah.
Oh, the car that we drive, the home that we live in, the schools that our kids go to. We have our moments of commiseration. Right? You walk into your kid's school and it's one of those like Christmas program type deals, and we're all shuffling in and it's busy and it's stressful, and you kind of catch the eye of one of your buddies and you both kind of roll your eyes a little bit.
Yeah.
But outside of that, we all want everybody to believe that like we're happy, we got it together, and most of us don't.
No.
I mean, if you drive through any middle America neighborhood, and if you could open that garage door and be a fly on the wall, like everyone's got some serious shit going on.
Yeah. Whatever
that is. Illnesses, divorces, financial problems, stress, or it's dark outside, the seasonal effectiveness shit, or who knows what it is. But most of us don't want to air that.
Right. Matter of fact, most of us want to fake it.
Right.
And we only need to look as far as like Facebook or something to see what people post the life they want to portray
to
others.
Yes.
rather than how.
And I think that dynamic alone leads people to not know their limits, because you need to be able to keep it going.
Yeah.
And that desire to keep up with the Joneses or to have all of your shit together is really exhausting. And I think a lot of people are struggling inside of their own heads, but you never figure out a way to actually get that off your chest to be able to process it.
Yeah.
And maybe that fear of people realizing that you don't have it together is why we're a little prone to not even ask other people if they're struggling.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to put them in a spot where they have to lie to you or they have to hide.
Well, I know and I hit a point in my personal life, family life, where I think I've told you this before about deciding. We made a conscious decision. We're going to kind of cut back on this stuff and go a little more anonymous. So we went the other way. So I don't post shit on Facebook.
Right.
My wife doesn't either. We'll post, happy birthday pictures and things like that. But as far as the look at me and the shit I'm doing and how awesome it is, no, we don't do that. We've chosen anonymity, and we found that we're way happier not trying to be everything to everybody. And you could apply that in work, absolutely. Don't you think?
Yeah, where you intentionally are not trying to please everybody.
Yeah, you don't need to volunteer for every single thing. Just be good at what you were hired to do, and be a good employee, or be a good manager, be a good boss, owner, whatever.
I agree. We're not supposed to agree. It's more enjoyable whenever we disagree.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, building a career, building a family, building a life. You want to do it all. Like, think about the dream of people. I don't even play the lottery, but you hear the comments of like, if I won the lottery, I'd do blank.
Yeah.
Half of those things can be done without winning the lottery.
Right.
It's just about reprioritizing your life,
right,
about what you want to do. But when you feel the pressure to be that good employee, the good husband, the good dad at sports, the good coach, the good volunteer.
I think a lot of it comes down to efficiency as well. Using work as the example, and if you hit the pause button and assess yourself at work, I think we'd all agree, and statistically it's a fact, a lot of people waste a lot of time during that 8 or 9 or 10 hour day. So if you can get more efficient about what you're doing when you're at work, that might help you understand your limit. And same with the volunteer aspect, it's getting more efficient about what you're doing and when you're doing it can free the mind a little bit and release some stress. I almost drank out of this.
Don't. Well, I think we've kind of covered all we could in regards to knowing your limits. So I'm going to know our limit right now and know that we've accomplished it. We could ramble on about this, of course, but to me, this is one of those topics where all you have to do is be able to just own it and just admit it. Just admit that something's not going well and there needs to be some type of change.
Right.
And trying to fake through it, fight through it is not always the right stance. And if you're trying to own that all on your shoulders without being able to lean on other people, maybe it's the mom, maybe it's the spouse, maybe it's the frickin' psychologist or whatever, you were all prone to medicate and or fake our way through it, and we're just adding more stress on top of it, and things aren't really resolving themselves. So that's why, for me, the more honest and vulnerable I can be about having a shitty day, about struggling with this or struggling with that, I can get feedback from other people, and I don't have to fucking fake it anymore. I don't have to keep the facade going.
Right.
So even though I don't pull that off well all the time, I'm just making an intentional effort to humble myself by throwing it out there and venting it and getting feedback at the same time.
Yeah.
And then it's up to my stubborn ass as to whether or not I actually listen to the feedback that I get
A little self-reflection.
A little self-reflection, a little implementation, and then see how things start to change. And before you know it, it starts to turn the corner. But until you realize the limit, get feedback on what's going on, and try and make some type of change, you're just masking your way through the unhappiness, and eventually shit's going to break down. You're going to fuck up your knee.
Yeah.
You're going to get fired. You're going to, like, something's going to go down that's going to force you into the change.
Yep.
So if you can just acknowledge it at the beginning and air it, air the dirty laundry a little bit with your trusted resources, get some feedback and adjust course, now you have a chance to be able to head off the divorce, financial ruin, twisted knee, job loss, that type of stuff. Boom.
Boom.
All right, everyone. We'll come back again next week. We got a guest next week, which will be enjoyable. Love hearing people's opinions. So appreciate you listening to episode number 9. We will see you later. You just got done listening to Hire and Fire, a production by Pyra Consulting. Please check us out online on either LinkedIn, Facebook, or our website at pyraconsulting.com. That's PIRA consulting.com.